Okay. Good morning. We're here at the JCC on the the 19th of February 2015, and I'm interviewing Joyce Levine for the purpose of the Roots to Boots project. What I'd like to do, Joyce, is to start out by asking you to tell us what you know about your ancestors prior to South Africa, what you might know about your mother's family or your father's family in the countries that they came from prior to coming to South Africa.
My father was born in Lithuania. He was, I think he was he was quite a lot older than my mother. He was a very, I sometimes think that he didn't understand us. We were young kids growing up in South Africa, educated in South Africa. And when I think back over the years, this gentleman, he was so polite and such a nice person. I don't think he knew how to communicate with us kids. Whereas my mother, having grown, my mother was born in Belgium. At the time of the First World War. Her parents took her and the other children, 2 brothers and 2 sisters, to England, where they had family. After the war, the First World War, the family in England couldn't support these orphans, so they sent them to family in South Africa.
And where in South Africa did they send them to?
I haven't thought about this in years. I just can't think of it. It must have been Cape Town.
Cape Town?
Yes.
And that's where your mother grew up?
Yeah.
And your father grew up in Lithuania?
Well, I don't really know. You know, he wasn't as outgoing as my mother was. He was a very, he was there. He was like a distant parent. Not bad, or he just, I don't think he understood us kids, you know, whereas my mother was into everything we were doing, and first of all she was educated in England, and you know, she knew what was going on, whereas we hardly knew him.
Did he speak English?
Yes he did, but he was like he was there. But he was never interested in what we were doing and things like that, whereas my mother was into everything that we were doing, you know, and she would, in those days, very few women had cars, you know, she would walk to the school and meet us and walk home with us, and she had been educated in England.
How did they meet?
I don't know, now that you ask me. I would say to you, I think that it was an arranged marriage. I don't seem to have any recollection of her saying, you know, the sort of arrangement that we would have had, you know, where we went out to a dance or something and met each other and that. I actually think, now that you're asking me the question, that probably it was an arranged marriage.
Do you know how old they were when they married?
Well, my mom was 19 and my dad was 40.
40?
Yes, he was an elderly man.
And what type of work was he doing?
I'll use the word dealt. He worked with cattle and farming sort of things, you know. It was like a different world that we knew. I never I grew up in a city, so I never knew that.
When you say he dealt with cattle, was he a cattle broker?
I think partly. I'm not quite sure. He knew all about them, you know, how to look after them, and yes, he probably was. I never thought of it with the word broker, you know.
Well,
he dealt in it.
Did he own the cattle, or was he selling the cattle for other people?
You know, I'm not sure. Now that you're asking me, I haven't even thought about it in years. I would say I think that he owned it.
So he had land with cattle with him?
I have no recollection of him actually owning the land. We lived in a place in South Africa called Muizenberg, which was right at the bottom of Africa. At the bottom of Africa is a bay.
Yes.
And we lived on that bay, on the beach. And he would be in a tiny little town in South Africa, in what they call one of the areas, the Karoo. Do you know it at all?
No.
Oh. And he would be dealing in these with cattle and sheep and all that sort of thing. You know, I was a child in those days, and somehow, and he was such a reticent, quiet man, whereas my mother was into everything that we kids were doing. You know, first of all, she was educated in England, so she could speak English and everything. And
so what was your childhood like? I mean, what kind of schools did you go to?
Nothing. Well, I went to the school in Muizenberg. We lived in Muizenberg. You know, at the bottom of Africa, there's a bay.
Right.
We lived in Muizenberg, and there was a school there, and what we called in South Africa matric, which is your final year in school. There was never really any sort of thought of going to university or anything. Even I had an older brother and an older sister, and then me, and then a younger sister. Incidentally, all the three of them passed away with cancer.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So this was a public school?
Yes, yes.
Did you have any opportunity for any religious education?
Well, my brother had a bar mitzvah and had all the training. We didn't. I can't give you an answer why.
What about you as a girl?
As a girl, well, you know, my two sisters and I, we grew up in a home where we had we celebrated all the holidays, and it was part of our life. And I'm assuming that my mother and father were part of the committees or whatever. My mother certainly of the shul and things like that.
Did you have kosher meat?
I think so. Oh, I just assumed that it was. I'm sure we did. I'm sure we did. Now that you're asking me, you know, I haven't thought about these things in years.
Was there any longing for a Zionist longing?
Not. I became more involved in that sort of thing when I was older. You know, maybe still in school, we had all the. Gosh, I haven't thought of these things in years. We had things like, well, of course, there was a very big British influence in South Africa, and they had Girl Guides and Boy Scouts, and we were all. My brother was a Boy Scout, and we were Girl Guides, and we did all these things. You know, you had to sort of pass certain tests and things, and then you would get a badge on the uniform that you wore.
Were these Zionist Boy Scouts?
No, it wasn't Zionist.
Wasn't Zionist.
No, but I was very aware of Zionism and things like that. We were never. We were always aware. First of all, we celebrated Shabbat, and we celebrated all the Yontavim. We had all that in our home, but we weren't specifically Zionist. We knew all about it, and we went to all these meetings and whatever. But I wouldn't say that we were. What's the word I'm looking for?
No, you've made it clear. So once you finished high school, what did you do at that point?
First of all, well, there wasn't any question whether we could go to university or anything. we finished matric, which was the final year at school, and I did a course in shorthand and typing. And I, over the years, for many years, I worked as a secretary at a few various places, you know. And I did that for a long time, even after I was married. And at one point after I was married, I was introduced to my husband by a cousin of mine.
Really?
Yes, which turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to anybody.
Tell me about your husband.
Oh, he was such a nice man.
What was his name?
David.
And how old were you when you met him?
I must have been about 21 or 22.
And how old
He was 10 years older than me. And we had a wonderful life together.
Where was he living at the time that
In Johannesburg. At that, after I had finished school and after a few years, I went to live Johannesburg was, you know, Cape Town was like a small town in comparison to Johannesburg. And it was like as if everything was more exciting in Johannesburg. There was more going on in Johannesburg and things like that. And that's where I met my husband. And when I came to live here, he was still alive, and he passed away very sadly 3 years ago.
So you met him, some people introduced you, the two of you in
Yeah,
Johannesburg?
a cousin of mine.
A cousin of yours.
And it was made in heaven.
Oh, that's wonderful.
No, it was really very good. It was very good. Sounds a bit childish the way I'm speaking.
No, not at all.
It was just a great marriage. I mean, we had 53 years
Oh,
together.
that's terrific.
In excellent health, both of us. I have 4 children. You met my son, yeah?
Yes, I did.
I have a daughter who's older than Ian, and then I have 2 sons younger than Ian.
So what type of business was your husband in?
My husband wasn't in business on his own. He was for a short while. He was a sales representative, and he worked for companies in the wood and timber business. And he was really into it because he knew it thoroughly. He didn't have a university education or anything like that, but he finished school, and in those days, if you were lucky and you found a good job, you took it because it was very necessary. I didn't know him in those days. And he had quite a sad life. His mother actually brought him and his sister and 2 other siblings on her own. The father disappeared out of sight.
I see.
And who knows what.
So you brought a lot of sunshine to his life.
Pardon?
So you brought a lot of sunshine
I
to his
hope
life.
so. I hope so. We had a very good marriage.
And
we
you
got
lived
lovely children.
You lived all of that time until you came here?
We lived part of the time in Cape Town and most of the time in Johannesburg. We were always members of shul, going to shul and keeping the Ontavim, and we did all those things. The children were brought up like that.
What was the shul, an Orthodox shul?
Orthodox, yes.
So did you have a kosher home there?
Yes. Yes. And my 2 sisters as well. And
Were you active in the synagogue life?
not really. Not really. I can't give you an answer about it, you know. We were members and we went. I didn't have that kind of education. I mean, I could go to the service, but I couldn't read it and things like that. In my day, I don't remember the girls having the kind of education in Hebrew and everything that they have now.
Were there other opportunities to be involved in Jewish communal life in Sana?
Yes.
Tell me about the things that you did there.
I haven't thought about it in years. I always worked with not the Zionist, the Jewish Women's Benevolent Society. And God, I haven't thought about this in years.
What type of work did they do?
Well, mostly I was in the office. There were people who struggled and people who needed assistance and all that sort of thing, They always have those kinds of organisations. I'm sure they have it here.
Is it like a free loan association?
I don't remember that. There were certain, I'm trying to think. I don't think anything was free. I didn't have anything to do really with that sort of part of it, finance and things like that. But I was always a part of being there, and if people needed things, and I was always there working, and more often than not I was on the committees.
Uh-huh.
And we also had at one time I worked in the office, the head office of the Jewish community in Cape Town.
Uh-huh.
And there I met Rabbi Dushinsky. He was the Beis-Din at the time when I was there. And I did all his work, not in Hebrew.
Uh-huh.
He would dictate his letters and things in English, but he would say to me, whatever, leave a space or leave a couple of lines, and then go on, and then when the letter was completed and everything, wherever there was a space, he would write that in Hebrew.
Uh-huh. Right.
And he was like, he was somebody that he was the Beis-Din, and he was a person that was, I think he played quite an influence in my life. Not because of the way he spoke, and when he would be doing letters, or we would be doing whatever was required, and he would go into explanations and things like that for me. I didn't really have a Hebrew education. I mean, my parents we always had all the Untittled and things like that in our home. But he was a great influence in my life, because he was somebody I had such respect for him.
It sounds like you learned about Jewish law and the halakha from him.
Well, I suppose, it was all part of it, and all the, well, he was the Beis-Din, and whatever you do for them, it's all part of the work.
Right.
I haven't thought about it in years.
Yeah. Well, he would deal with the controversies in the community with the divorces and that sort of thing.
Yes, but he never sort of discussed those individually.
Right.
He would talk about situations, but not about what was happening to various people.
No, but the situations and
in the community,
in the types of issues he had to deal with, and the halakhic rulings and so forth.
Yes.
I'm sure you learned a lot about the Torah law behind the decisions that he made.
Various things, yes.
And that would have been very interesting.
It was. I mean, it sort of the time that I spent working in that office, that it was the head office of the community in Cape Town. It played a very important part in my life.
Did you go on to study more Judaism from books after that?
Not terribly much, unfortunately, although I'm a big reader. Maybe not so much now, but I was. I was so busy. I had these 4 kids.
What types of books did you like to read?
History, Jewish affairs, novels, as everybody does. I find it very difficult to read a novel now. It seems to go on forever with nonsense things. But I was always reading, and and what else can I say? And I was very busy, I mean, I have 4 children.
Right.
And I led a very, very busy life.
So tell me about the decision to move here to Dallas. When did that happen, and how did that happen?
My son Ian and my younger son Jeff came to us one day and said they were leaving South Africa. I don't remember the reasons that they gave at that time, but my older son Ian had been in the army. I don't know whether that was the specific reason, but things were changing, and they came to us one day and said that they were going to go and live in America. Well, I mean, Ian was an adult, Jeff was quite a lot younger, and they came here. And slowly, and then my other son, he's younger than Ian, his name is Joseph, or Joss, and he had left South Africa and he went to live in New York. And he wanted to go into acting. And my husband was absolutely horrified that he actually wanted to do something like that.
Why was that?
I think my husband felt, what's acting? This isn't the way you live, He had a different idea about it. He didn't think it was a good thing. But Joss went to live in New York, and he lived there for quite a long time, and many years. He now lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I don't think he ever got, what's the word I want to use? I've not put it into words before. I don't think he got out of what he was doing that he was satisfied with it. Even now when we talk and he tells me what he's at the moment he's going through not a bad stage. I think he's sort of, I don't know how to explain it to you. I think he's sort of neither here nor there at the moment, which happens to people sometimes,
Of course.
I see that. And my younger son, Jeff, is in business. Don't ask me what he does, it's all online. I can't even tell you what it's about. My daughter's married, she lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Oh, and my son Joss also lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma now.
So how was it that you and your husband decided to come here?
Well, things had changed a lot in South Africa. It was a different sort of a place, and our kids had left, Ian had left, and Joss had left. And
what year did you come here?
I can't tell you. Must be a good between 15 and 20 years. I'm not quite sure. I haven't thought about it. We've been here so long. I even became an American citizen.
Oh, well, I would hope so.
Pardon?
I would hope so. Did you live in a private home when you first came?
Yes. No, I came with my husband and the children.
And did you live?
Ian was here, and my younger son Jeff.
Right.
They came together.
Yeah. Did you live in a private home when you first came?
Yeah.
You had your own home.
Yes. Yes.
And how did you feel about your integration into the community at that time?
Into Dallas. It took a long time because we came to Dallas, and then we were in Tulsa, Oklahoma for a few years.
Oh, you moved to Tulsa?
Yes, our daughter was there.
Mm-hmm.
And she said to us, I don't remember the exact words, what about coming to be here in Tulsa? And we went. I don't remember the details, quite honestly. At that time, my husband was not in great shape, and although he was not a young man at all, he was 10 years older than me, so I don't even remember what actually caused it. All of a sudden he couldn't move, he couldn't do anything for himself, and he became incapacitated. He was in the Tremont, He was there for over 3 years, close to 4 years.
So you had moved back from Tulsa into Dallas?
Yes.
And then at that point he was in Tremont, and you were still in your private home?
No, at that time I was still with my daughter.
Oh, you were with your daughter in Tulsa?
I haven't thought about it. Yeah, I just...
But at some point you came back to Dallas?
Oh, yes.
And then, unfortunately, your husband passed away.
No, well, he didn't pass away immediately. He was in the facility for about 3 years, over 3 years. And this just went on and on and on. And he passed away just over a year ago.
A year ago?
He was there for over 3 years. Couldn't do anything, had to be cared for.
And so where are you currently living?
I live at Town Village.
How do you like living there?
Well, I'm enjoying it. I've only been there since January. I lived at the Tremont.
Oh, I see.
I lived at the Tremont, which was like a residential
Yes,
part,
I'm
and my husband was in the facility next door,
right,
where they cared for him. And at that time, I wasn't driving anymore. My children decided I wasn't driving anymore. Excuse me when I say that.
No, I understand. I made that same decision for my mother.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Much to my anger.
Well, it's in your best interest because my mother was. I had to make that decision when my mother was no longer capable of driving safely, and it was for her best interest. So, I understand.
I didn't feel that way.
Well,
I never had an accident in all my years of driving, and I felt at that time that I could have still been driving, but it's done and it's finished, and I don't have any grudges or anything about it. I would have liked to have gone on. I never ever had an accident in all the years of driving, but it's done. I don't have any problems.
So tell me what it's like living in Town Village North.
Well, I've only been there since January.
Okay.
It's very pleasant. People always say to me, "Why did you leave the other place?" I wanted to leave the other place because in the time I lived there, I watched my husband over 3 years in this where he couldn't move. He couldn't get up on his own. They had like a sling which they put behind him, and they lifted him up, and he was incontinent, and he went on like that for over 3 years. And I lived in the facility next door.
So it was a sad environment for you.
Yes.
You needed some place that would give you...
Well, that's how I feel.
Yeah.
People say, "Why did you go?" I needed for myself because I have to go on now.
Right.
And I can't live in that. I wanted to be away from it.
Right. I don't blame you.
No, I'm not making excuses.
I think you made a very wise choice.
Yeah.
Because Town Village is a place that's very lively. A lot going on.
Yes, there's a lot going on, and I know a lot of people from the J, and I've met a lot of people, and I had to go away. I think for myself, There was nothing wrong with the other place. People say, "Why did you go?" The memories were hard.
Yeah.
It was a hard time.
Yeah.
When you watch somebody who was so active and so together and handling everything and seeing to everything, and he was 10 years older than me, tended to be somewhat overprotective.
Of course.
Uh,
So now you're in an environment that's got a lot going on and a lot of happiness, and it's very vivacious there. And, the mayor, Sam, will make sure that you've met Mayor Sam.
no, I haven't.
You haven't met
No.
Mayor Sam?
Who's
Well,
Mayor Sam? Should I know him?
Oh, well, there's a gentleman there by the name of Sam. He considers himself the mayor.
Oh,
I'm sure.
I'm sure so. At some point I'll
Yes,
meet.
you'll meet him. There's lovely people living there.
It's very nice,
Yeah.
and it's the whole atmosphere
It's uplifting.
is yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's a good word.
Yes. So, to kind of wrap this up, is there anything that I might have forgotten to ask you that you'd like to tell us about your history? And then secondarily, is there anything that you'd like to leave in terms of philosophic thoughts that you'd like to leave as a legacy to your family?
I don't know. I'd have to think about all this. I don't know. I mean, they've watched us. I'm talking about Ian and his brothers and my daughter. They know where they came from and the sort of life that we led. And I don't know how they feel about it, but I think we gave them a very sort of. I know younger people probably went through the same thing, have all sorts of gripes in their growing up years. But we felt that we gave them the best that we could. Nobody wanted to go to university or anything. Nobody asked for it. I'm sure if any of them had asked for it, my husband would have seen to it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Once he wasn't able to look after his own affairs, things sort of, I wouldn't say they became difficult. He handled everything very efficiently, you know, our finances and our whatever we did all the years, you know. He was a very capable person and handled everything. He handled the finances all the time, really. He was very good at it as well. I don't know. I haven't thought about these things.
Okay, but you've really told me a great deal about your history and about your family.
You
and-
think so?
Oh yes, I think so, and I think it'll be a great gift to the community to have your story on tape, and certainly, and a great gift to your family as well. And I want to
Well-
thank you so much for giving us the time this morning to spend
Well,
with
thank you.
Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day and
Thank you.
enjoy the rest of your time today.
Are you going to write all this?
It's all on videotape, and you're going to be getting a copy of the videotape
Oh.
once it has been edited, and then a copy will go into the archives for our collection.
I wonder what my children are going to say about all this.
Your children will be delighted.
You think?
I think so. Thank you so
I
much,
hope so.
Joyce.
I
I
hope
appreciate
so.
it.
Thank you.